Gillette last night?
Bon Jovi.
No, I know people who did, but
I know two people who did.
We almost did.
Brothers? Yeah, I know. My brothers.
sorry, I squashed that.
It's
You know what I couldn't believe, and I don't know what it means. Rolling Stones takes what, about $200 to go to a concert? You can get Bon Jovi tickets for $12 at Gillette Stadium on
Really?
Groupon.
Huh.
$12.
yeah, that was so far away that you need a telescope to see the
But
stage.
still, it's like, really? $12?
You know how much the front sections were going for?
Brothers went.
Oh, that's funny.
Like the pit right in front, like $600-700.
They have a nosebleed
That
section.
I don't doubt.
They already know. A friend of ours that
There's a reason John Bon Jovi and Robert Kraft are friends.
Well, I know Taylor,
It is because they both have a very overdeveloped sense of profit.
Taylor Swift is going to be playing. She's already been
I'm sorry.
in Rhode Island. On the coast, so she's already been sold out. I'm like,
There's Kennedy's in Rhode Island?
She sold out what?
no, she sold out her concert.
So Taylor moved from the Cape to Rhode Island, huh?
Yeah.
Who in Rhode Island is famous that she's going to fall in love with?
In Rhode Island?
Providence.
Yeah, most of the people that are famous in Rhode Island are famous for all the wrong reasons. I mean, not to diss like an entire state, but
But go ahead. Go ahead.
no, that's as far as I was going with that. Honestly, I'm not. I really don't want to diss an entire state.
People that live in Rhode Island. I mean, I like the people in Rhode Island.
Our church was started as the Baptist Church of Cumberland and Wrentham, so
Yeah, you're kind of like on the nicer side.
which sounds like two little towns, doesn't it?
Cumberland's huge.
It is.
And Cumberland's smaller than it used to be. Like landmass, part of Seekonk and I think part of Woonsocket and yeah, it used to be. And Wrentham actually used to be a lot bigger.
Seaconk's on the other side of Providence.
It was weird, the layout. It was weird. It was one of those kind of. I'm like, really? But I was looking at the historical maps.
Oh, I know, but
I think it was
when we
Seekonk.
went to Steve's kid's birthday party, that's
Yeah, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't Seekonk, but it was like somewhere further out west than I would have anticipated, or out east, further east than I would have anticipated it being to the border. And the town of Wrentham actually used to be like 4 times as big as it is today. Back in the day, Plainville was part of Wrentham, Norfolk was a part of Wrentham, and Franklin was all part of Wrentham. All 3 of those towns split off from Wrentham over the years. So, yeah, our sending area was bigger than 2 towns. Yeah, almost. I mean, you think Franklin County goes all the way up into Dedham, and which is just weird. But of course, most people are like, "Where's Franklin County?" Is it Franklin County? I think Norfolk County. Norfolk County.
Route 2.
That's right. See, there you go. See, counties don't mean as much up here, so it's harder to keep.
Maybe I'm thinking it's the wrong county.
No, it's yeah. Well, see, I had to take
when there's a thunderstorm watch for Middlesex County going, all right, where am I?
Where is that? Worcester County. What? I'm not in Milford. I only know that because I drive by the sign every day that says you're now in Worcester County. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's great. But I took New Jersey state history, not Massachusetts state history. So, like in high school, you had to name all of the 21 counties of the state of New Jersey and all that good stuff. So, well, in New Jersey, county government actually is a little more prevalent, especially where I'm from. South Jersey, the county government is a little more developed because you have towns and you have townships and you have things that are, it's a little bit different.
Rhode Island has 5 different counties.
Well, that's amazing, actually, for the size of the state.
And
Sorry, did I just diss Rhode Island again? On a roll. All right, let's get to 1 Thessalonians, just in case we don't. Page 623. Now, as long as we're in a mood to discuss, holy Smurf, look at the time. We have to discuss quickly, succinctly. You ever had a desire to do something good for somebody else, but you were, bless you, hindered? You had a desire to do something good for somebody else, a very good thing for somebody else, not for yourself, but you were hindered and not able to actually follow through on your desire. You ever come across that? Anything that you can share?
Usually monetarily.
Remembering that we're on camera. Yeah, okay. So if you want to help somebody monetarily, is it your own lack thereof that got in the way, or I've had that happen?
Well, lack of monetary funds, yes.
I'd love to help you, but can I borrow something instead? Yeah. Okay. Anything that's non-monetary related,
Maybe someone who's
not
got
directly money-wise.
religious questions that you don't really know how to answer.
Oh, good example. Somebody who has a Bible question that you don't know how to answer. You want to help them, but you just don't know. Okay, that's a good example.
By the way, I have a question for you.
Okay, now I'm hoping I have the answer.
She doesn't, so she help with you.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot more times you have the intention that something else comes up.
Okay, so life kind of gets in the way. Occasionally, it's how I tend to think of it, but yeah, something else comes up, you have good intentions, but you know where the path of good intentions leads. Somewhere south of the border in eternity.
Something else that you want to do is not necessarily important
Okay,
enough to change what you should have done in the first place.
okay, good. So when we have this desire to help somebody out, and for whatever reason, we are unable to actually help them in the way that we had desired to, what is our kind of emotional response? What does that do? How do you feel in that moment? Okay, guilt might be especially true if it's, you are the one who got in your way. Love to help you, but I just went to McDonald's, and so you're out of luck.
I feel bummed out that I couldn't do something.
Okay, bummed out,
A little disheartened.
disheartened, okay, a little discouraged. Frustrated? Does that come up? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think we're kind of walking all the way around that emotion. So let me just, kind of, that's. I mean, it's all part of it's all good. And these are actually, it's a good thing. I would say, I try to say to people, if you do bad and you feel bad, that's good. Because if you do bad and you feel good, that's bad. And so when we're unable, when we are frustrated in our attempts to help somebody, we should feel frustrated. It kind of works together that way. Whether it manifests as guilt or inability or however it comes up. The reality in the Christian life and in the work of God, this comes up frequently because not only do we sometimes get in our own way, but we have an adversary who is constantly trying to be in our way as well. Someone who does not want us to help others, somebody who does not want us to succeed. That person may be spiritual, which is probably what came to mind initially, but there are those people who are also, corporeal, physical human beings who don't like us, who don't like what we stand for, and they don't want us to succeed, and so they will stand in the way as well. And we run across that at all layers of life. That you can run into somebody who is just trying to slow down the process because they don't like what you're trying to do, or more specifically, in whose name you're trying to do it. And so that has actually always been a facet of doing God's work. And so in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, we find ourselves today that Paul experienced a similar frustration and some, similar experiences. One of the great things about reading through Paul, though we may personally, as I look at all the disciples in the Bible, I relate probably more closely in my own mind anyway to Peter, the guy who knew what the sole of his own foot tasted like and seemed to get it wrong as often as he got it right. I relate in my own heart and mind and life to him. Paul just seems like, the super Christian, like Paul should have worn a cape or something. And so I don't always identify strongly with him. And yet, as we look at his life and we look at his writings and we look at, what we know, he was not without his own struggles. He knew what it was to face criticism. He knew what it was to face failure, to face frustration, even to face his own shortcomings and sinful nature. And so we see that again here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. So we're going to begin in verse 17. Good grief, they want me to get all the way through the end of chapter 3? That just simply ain't happening. We'll see what happens. All right. So we'll start off in verse 17. But we, brethren, having been taken away from you for a short time in presence, not in heart, endeavored more eagerly to see your face with great desire.
Therefore, we wanted to come to you, even I, Paul, time and again, but Satan hindered us.
19.
For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Is it not even you in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming?
For you are our glory and joy.
Wherefore, when the Lord were here, we thought it good to be left at Athens alone.
And sent Timotheus, our brother, minister of God, and our fellow laborer, to establish you, to comfort you concerning your faith.
And no one should be shaken by these afflictions, for you yourselves know that we are appointed to this.
In fact, if we were with you, we kept telling you that we would be persecuted. And it turned out that way, as you will know. For this reason, when I can no longer endure, I sent to you knowing your faith. Lest by some means of comfort and tempted you, and our leave might be weakness.
But know that Timothy has come to us from you and brought us good news of your faith and love, and that you always have good remembrance of us, greatly desiring to see us, as we also to see you. Some of the wording in there gets a little awkward, but what Paul is talking about here, and it's just the same thing that we've been talking about. Here's Paul. He wants to go visit the church there at Thessalonica. These are people, and one of the things that I'm constantly impressed by as I read through Paul is just that somebody who is physically unable to see or does not see well, as we believe Paul was approaching blindness, especially later in life, and without the advantage of, say, anything to kind of write things down on. The idea of having an address book or, whatever you might use to store things, without Evernote, OneNote, whatever your storage method is, scratch pads, Post-it notes, whatever your remembrance system is, he didn't have that. And yet, how many people does he mention in his writings? How many people does he desire to see and expresses genuine love for, and expresses it in such a way that he at least remembers who these people are? He's calling people by name constantly as he's going, writing to all these different churches in all these different places. I mean, unless I work at it hard, I don't remember the people around me that often. You visit once or twice, and if I meet you once or twice, it's like, okay, slim chance I remember it unless I can get it written down and work on it. Seriously, rehearse it mentally. Okay, what was her name again? What was her name? In my business, that's just not good to not remember names. Of course, you can always default to that on, hey, brother. That works really well. Hey, sister. That just says I drew a blank. That happens occasionally. But Paul, as he was writing, in a lot of his letters, communicates this to us, this understanding that when he said he loved people, he actually knew them and he actually remembered them, which, considering that he had done several world tours, was pretty impressive. That he remembers all these people, and so here he is. He really, the church at Thessalonica. He'd planted the church. There was some fondness there. He really wanted to get over to see them, but he just wasn't able to get there. And whatever resistance that he was encountering, he, in this case, considered it a spiritual resistance, that Satan had hindered him. We don't know specifically what it was that had stopped Paul from being able to go to Thessalonica, but something was hindering him. And so he was doing what he could. He was writing a letter because, that was as fast as a method as he had. And then he sends it with Timothy, which is by itself pretty good. I mean, Timothy was the guy, he was kind of Paul's right hand. And so when Paul sent Timothy, that was just short of him coming himself. He and Timothy were that close. Timothy was that level in Paul's organization, if you want to think of it in those terms. That if he absolutely couldn't get there, but you were really that important, he would send Timothy. Or you were really that messed up, he would send Timothy. So take it either way. But in this case, he said, look, I had to know what was going on there. I had to know how you were doing. I needed to know that you're okay. And so I'm sending Timothy because he can assess you, and he will be able to communicate to me how you're doing on a level that I understand. He will ask the same questions and see the same things that I would ask and I would see if I were there. And so he said, I sent Timothy there to see what's going on, make sure you're okay, and then to instruct you, to make sure that anything that's not going right there on the ground, Timothy can take care of it. And so, I sent him because I was that concerned for you. And so what we see in Paul is even though he is facing difficulty, he can't get there, still he loves them. Still there is a care for them that it transcends fondness. It's genuine. I really love you. I really am concerned. I really want to make sure you're okay. And that's really one of the kind of the hallmarks of the kind of love that we ought to have for each other, that we really are concerned and have a genuine care for one another that says, when you have a need, I want to be able to fill it. When you have a hurt, I want to be able to soothe it. When you have, a joy, I want to be able to celebrate with you. I want to be able to care for you. And that's where Paul is with the church there at Thessalonica. I'll get it there. I keep wanting to call it Thessalonia. It's Thessalonica. Huh? Yeah, Thessalonica. Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, the place isn't even there anymore, so who cares, right? But no, it's important to get it right. So that's where Paul is, and then he's going to continue on in verse 7.
Therefore, brethren, in all our affliction and distress, we were comforted concerning you by your faith.
For now we live, if you stand fast in the Lord.
For what thanks can we render to God for you, for all the joy with which we rejoice for your sake before our God?
Night and day, praying exceedingly that we might see your face, and might perfect that which is lacking in your faith.
All right, so, and this is kind of a short point, but it's an important one. We have in our programs, which you don't have today's yet, but we have these little tear-off cards. And on our connection card, what's on the back side of it? Dominates the bottom half of the back. It's just a place for you to list your prayer requests. Now, the idea behind us doing that was so that we could pray for each other. Many people have, checked the box above it. I commit to praying for my church family. I guess the question, and don't answer it, would be how well do we honor that commitment? I'm sure if you're like me, some days is better than others, some weeks is better than others. But the idea that when we care for somebody, we ought to pray for somebody. And that ought to be both a prayer for the things that they need, but also just a prayer of thanks that they're there at all. I think about friends that I have. I'm glad that I have them, thankful that I have friends that I have. Even when you're hurting or they're hurting and I'm praying for their needs, there's still within me that piece of me that says, I'm glad that I have somebody to pray for. I'm just thankful they're in my life. That kind of an idea. And so when we think about our friends and the love that we have for each other within the church and within the greater context of the world, that ought to be something we give thanks to God for the relationships that we have. Hopefully that'll help us to not take it for granted. We tend to anyway. But then also praying for each other is a real act of friendship. When I can say, hey, I'm praying for you. Or more importantly, when I actually am praying for you and not saying it. That we can actually go to God on behalf of somebody else instead of saying, hey, God, give me. Say, hey, God, they need you. That takes a minute of selflessness, even in that discipline. And so Paul here, without the benefit of a connection card, is...
Doesn't that kind of become a real big list? You keep adding and adding and adding, and you don't want to forget to pray for others. others like from 2 weeks ago.
It,
What you're saying is you're almost saying that we should always continually pray for, say, me for Debbie, me for Bob, me for Sue, me for you. And now I know Cindy, so now it's Cindy, and then now I know Steve, and now I pray for Steve. You know, so it's an ongoing.
yes.
As you get older, your prayer time should be longer and longer and longer.
Well, I found out when, after I got saved, that was the mission that God gave me to be a prayer warrior. I will continually pray for something, especially a specific situation, until that's done. And as soon as that's done, something else gets done. You know, something else gets added. And everyone, you know, it's constant. You know, it becomes even collective. It's not just people that I know. It's like when I hear outside situations, you know, around the country, around the world, it's immediately praying for something. And it becomes almost like breathing. It never goes away. And if you're very sincere about your feelings for the people in the world and around, you know, and around you, then you're so concerned that you just automatically start praying and not even thinking about it. It just becomes second nature.
Right, and that's pray without ceasing is what Paul said. But to offer a different, and I agree with everything you said, 100%. My approach is different. I'm not a list prayer. In fact, I'm really terrible at list praying. When I do pray, like you'll see me at church when I pray, one of the things I try to always keep at hand is a pen and paper, because I'm also a little bit ADD. Yeah, male too. No, but it's amazing. Because one of the things I found is prayer time is a natural distraction time, because I'm trying to focus. And of course, when you're trying to focus, that's when distractions will come most readily. And so what I have tried to do is, as a matter of discipline, is if something crosses my mind while I'm praying, I write it down so that I don't forget it. I know where it is, but I don't have to think about it. But I am not very good at praying for lists. So what I will do is, like, I will take our prayer list, I will read it once or twice, and that's about the extent of what I do for the actual list. And what I will try to do then is, as I'm praying, I pray for the things that come to mind. And so, much like Sue says, you know, it's a continual thing. It's not structured. I know people who are list prayers and they keep a prayer list and they pray through the prayer list. If I pray through a prayer list, I'm no longer praying. I'm just reading to God. You know, I'm just like, and this and this and this and this, and it becomes not a communication. And honestly, you know, you think about.
But as you're reading off the list, I mean, you take a second or two to think about what you're actually reading.
I tend to not. When I have a list in front of me, I tend to list. It's just me. And so you how you do it will look a little bit different than how other people do it. Like I said, there are people who are list prayers. I know people who keep journals and they have, you know, pages and pages of things and people that they pray for. In order for me to even come close to that, I have to like randomly set my finger down in different places, and you know, because if I have a list in front of me, and that's just me. Every person is wired a little bit differently, and it's going to work a little bit differently.
I guess the question then is, if you pray a list or if you just pray as you think, does one prayer mean more than the other? I'm praying off a list. It doesn't mean if I mean any less of that prayer.
Exactly. But it's a highly individualized thing.
That's where your heart is.
Right, because see, when I have a list in front of me, the list becomes the focus, not God. And that's where...
Does the prayer for that person or that episode lessen when you're just reading it off of the list? I don't know, it's the same question again.
For me, yes. It may not be for you.
Well,
And
all it really matters
right.
is what do you think, what is God?
God, as long as you're communicating, it's fine. But see, that's what I'm saying, is when I have a list, I'm no longer talking to God, I'm reading a list. And so for me, it breaks that communication. Other people, it's fine. It keeps it open. Great. And so, you know, it would be easier if I could say, you have to do it this way. Spiritual formation doesn't work that way. It's inherently messy, and rules are suggestive at best.
It's not in the Bible as to how to do it.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Right. You know, driving down the road, you see an accident. Oh, Lord, they're having a bad day. You know, help them. And it may be, my approach in those situations kind of casual. They're having a bad day. I don't know who they are, but you just help. They're going to need it.
Well, there's a traffic jam. There better be an accident.
Right. Yeah. That's when I start praying for my own attitude. So it depends. And prayer, like many other things, is something that is a discipline you grow into. And so while I may be bad at praying lists now, I'm not closed to the idea. And it may be that, in 10 or 15 years, my mind is quieter and that becomes a very real thing, a real possibility. So these things, you can grow and you can learn and should in this. The apostles said, hey, Jesus, teach us how to pray. And so he immediately told them why to pray. But the how was not so much, because prayer ultimately is a conversation with God. It's talking and it's listening. You can actually be absolutely silent in prayer, and God will speak to you. Hopefully not audibly, but you never know. I'm not going to put God in a box. But that idea of Him impressing upon your spirit a response, that should be there, Bob.
The churches I used to go to, when we prayed lists, we would keep them until the prayer was answered, then we cross it off and go on to something else. However, that can become a novel.
Yes.
Because a lot of times these things don't, especially if it's a general type of prayer. If it's a get well or a particular situation, then you can find the outcome to that. You can cross it off or not as the situation dictates. But a lot of these things are generalistic, and in that case, they can go on forever and ever and ever. So the question then becomes, how long do you pray for that specific event, knowing that it's going to go on forever before you drop it and go on to something else?
Yep.
Because other than that, your list is going to become, like I say, a very, very long.
For me, the answer is I pray as long as the Spirit motivates me to pray. And that doesn't work for everybody. One of the reasons that we do the prayer list the way we do is partially because of me. When I got here, they had a prayer list that they didn't send out a new prayer list every week. It was just updated every week. And it was lengthy, and some requests have been on there for years, and like people didn't remember who actually put the request up there, and so you didn't know if you had an answer, and God forbid you actually take it off the list. So our list is new every week. I tell people, if you have something you really want or need prayer for, put it, write it down. And if it's not answered by next week and it's still a need in your life, write it down again, because it's a brand new thing every week. And though we archive the copies, as you know, I don't reference archive copies. I see this week's. That's what I look at. That's what's in my heart and mind as I'm praying. Next week, whole new list. And so, it stops that from saying, we don't know how long this has been on the prayer list. We don't know who prayed for it. We don't know, but we want to make sure that those things that are actively on our hearts and actively in our needs are prayed for. And so that's kind of like the how we do it and the why. But again, it gives us, the prayer request is a kind of a structured way that we care for people. We say we care enough to have a plan in place to actually care intentionally. And we ought to care. So I knew I wasn't going to get through this whole lesson. So whatever is left, on your own, you need to get all the way down to, verse 13. So we're almost there. We're 2/3 of the way in. Not too bad. All right, good conversation, though. Far more important.